During yesterday's Apple showcase, the spotlight was on the iPhone 17 and a lineup of sleek new devices. Yet what was expected to be a celebration of innovation quickly shifted into something far more unsettling. The opening scene of what analysts warn could trigger a worldwide economic storm. Normally, an update like this would send fans into a frenzy and push Apple's market value tens of billions higher. But this time, the mood in political circles was entirely different. Reports from outlets such as Financial Times and Nikkei Asia revealed that several governments had intentionally chosen this moment as a symbolic strike at the core of America's financial power. The nations at the center of this maneuver are China and India, the two largest developing economies, which according to policy experts in Beijing and New Delhi have borne the brunt of Donald Trump's tariff battles. In India, steep import duties gutted textile and pharmaceutical exports to the US, leaving millions of jobs on the line. In China, the blow landed on the electronics industry, costing billions in lost orders and dragging down GDP growth. Now, according to insiders, both countries are preparing a move that few thought possible. You're watching Urbanio. If you also believe Donald Trump's policies are pushing the world in the wrong direction, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Together we can spread the message, raise awareness, and keep you updated with the news that really matters. The move insiders point to is nothing less than a complete ban on Apple's newest devices within their borders. According to those familiar with the draft language, the official statements will be severe, framing the iPhone 17 as a national security risk and a tool for possible espionage. For weeks, Chinese state outlets have circulated stories warning of suspicious features hidden inside the phone, even suggesting it carries chips designed to funnel information straight into the hands of US intelligence. In India, the reaction has been framed differently, with Prime Minister Narendra Modi championing his Make in India campaign. Apple has increasingly been portrayed as a symbol of the country's reliance on American technology. The Hindu reports that regulators there are weighing the cancellation of Apple's sales licenses, citing alleged certification issues and concerns over leaking sensitive data. The drama grew sharper given that, only days before Apple's big reveal, China had just hosted the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit. Behind closed doors, Chinese leader Xi Jinping and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi reportedly raised the subject of technological self-reliance and the possibility of taking joint action against major Western corporations. According to people close to the delegations, it was during these conversations that an initial agreement took shape. The launch of the iPhone 17 could be turned into a political weapon against Washington. Bloomberg, citing unnamed diplomats, described the discussions as unusually hard-lined, with both leaders agreeing that economic power should now serve as the sharpest tool against Apple. The fallout from such a strategy would be enormous. China and India stand as Apple's biggest markets outside the US, together representing hundreds of millions of units sold and nearly 40% of the company's worldwide revenue. To lose access to these buyers would threaten a $1 trillion wipeout in market value and trigger a stock collapse rippling through US pension funds, investment houses, and the wider financial system. Experts cited by the Wall Street Journal describe Apple as the anchor of confidence for the entire American tech industry. If that anchor is pulled away, they warn, the shock would ripple through the Nasdaq and even shake the S&P 500. Inside Washington, officials recognize how quickly the situation is slipping beyond control. For Donald Trump, who spent years escalating tariffs on China while accusing India of unfair trade practices, a strike against Apple would be nothing short of a backlash to his own strategy. The irony is sharp. Policies meant to defend US jobs now put its most valuable company at risk. According to insiders, Trump's team has already begun weighing aggressive countermeasures, from sanctions on Indian IT firms to new restrictions blocking Chinese manufacturers from accessing American cloud services. Analysts caution, however, that such moves would only deepen the fracture of the global economy. On Wall Street, the response has been muted but tense, with major funds quietly trimming their Apple holdings out of fear that politics may crush profits. According to Reuters, several hedge funds have already scrambled to move capital into gold and government bonds, bracing for the shock of a potential market collapse. Analysts are drawing parallels to the Huawei episode, when the Chinese tech giant suddenly faced sanctions and lost access to vital markets. But the difference this time is stark. It isn't a Chinese firm in the crosshairs, but Apple, a flagship of American influence. In Asia, tensions are building fast. Chinese social platforms are flooded with the hashtag #NoiPhone17, while Indian nationalists push for boycotts of US brands, framing the backlash as payback for years of American economic aggression. Reports from Kyodo News in Japan suggest Beijing and New Delhi are even weighing a joint declaration on forming a technological independence alliance, with possible participation from Iran, Pakistan, and several Central Asian nations. That is why many experts now look back at Apple's presentation not as the launch of a new phone, but as the spark of a global crisis. If the bans go ahead, the damage will extend far beyond Cupertino, striking at the foundations of the US economy itself, since Apple shares sit inside the retirement funds and portfolios of millions of investors worldwide. For Donald Trump, it becomes yet another challenge. The trade war he ignited circling back on America's largest corporation. No one can yet predict where this will lead, but one fact is beyond dispute. The iPhone 17 has ceased to be just a gadget and has become a geopolitical weapon. Around it, one of the most dangerous economic power plays of recent years is now unfolding. And perhaps the most alarming element is the domino effect it could unleash. Morgan Stanley warns that if sales in China and India are blocked for even half a year, Apple could see revenue shrink by 20%, setting the stage for its first quarterly decline in over 10 years. A red flag that could trigger a massive stock sell-off. In a matter of weeks, hundreds of billions in market value could be wiped out. Even more troubling, the shockwaves might not stop with Apple. They could destabilize the entire tech sector, dragging down Microsoft, Google, and Amazon as confidence in US corporations erodes. CNBC reports that leading executives in Silicon Valley are already warning each other in private chats about a looming domino effect. If Apple falls, Tesla, Qualcomm, and Nvidia's supply chains could be next in line, raising the possibility that the US technology export model itself could be called into question. One participant, quoted by CNBC, put it bluntly, "On the geopolitical stage, the situation is even more volatile. Washington understands that if China and India prove they can coordinate effectively against Apple, other BRICS members will almost certainly join in. South Africa and Brazil have already spoken out, demanding fairer treatment for their domestic industries, while Interfax reports that Russia is weighing fresh tariffs on US electronics. Taken together, these moves resemble the beginnings of a unified front, not just against one company, but against the American economic system as a whole. And so, what started as a polished Apple product launch has spiraled into the shadow of a global financial crisis. For the United States, the crisis represents yet another test of its economic endurance. For Donald Trump, it stands as the inevitable consequence of his tariff wars. And for Apple, it is nothing less than a moment of reckoning. The real question is whether the company can navigate its way through this storm, or if the iPhone 17 will be remembered not for its innovation, but as the turning point that marked the decline of America's technological empire. Looking at the bigger picture, it's hard not to see how much of this chaos traces back to Donald Trump's trade policies. The tariff war he started was framed as a way to protect American workers, but in reality, it strained relationships with key partners like China and India and set the stage for the backlash we're seeing now. Instead of building bridges, Trump's approach created walls, and those walls are now closing in on US companies. Apple might just be the first to feel the squeeze. But the deeper issue is that short-sighted protectionism has weakened America's ability to cooperate globally. In the end, Trump's legacy in trade looks less like safeguarding American jobs and more like accelerating the fractures in the very system that allowed American tech to dominate in the first place.